to another installment of Tropes versus Men. Before we get into the details of popular culture and the way it treats and represents men, let's go over some definitional terms. In this episode, misogyny. Misogyny is classified and defined as dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against women. Recently, many of you may be familiar with the term misogyny, as it has been leveled against critics of people who happen to be of the female gender, and also of women who happen to coincide with the progressive social justice warrior movement, which has lately been a way of leveling social control and deciding what people can and can't do and what people can and can't think. So frequently we see women who disagree with the progressive social control warrior narrative, and nobody cries misogyny when women who disagree with this idea are disparaged, fired, or otherwise bullied. However, when one of the chosen ones of this movement receives any criticism, regardless of her gender, a criticism that is in fact softened because of her gender, the word misogyny is the first one that pops up. So let's discuss the term, shall we? Misogyny. Dislike, contempt, or ingrained prejudice against women. Now, the opposite of this term is misandry, a word that not many people knew until a few years ago, when it started finally making its rounds as a popular and accepted word. Yet certain search engines, certain web browsers, and even programs such as Microsoft and LibreOffice still underline the word misandry in red as lacking a definition. Clearly, we have seen only one side of the story and have been given a lot of attention to misogyny, but have not been given nearly as much attention to misandry. Let's discuss the term misogyny further. A dislike, contempt, or ingrained prejudice against women. Now, it is true we should battle against prejudice within our hearts and ideas as much as possible. How would you classify a person who has experienced hardship and abuse from a particular group of people their entire life? Frequently, that's what we hear in the misogynist circles. Women who claim they were treated with misogyny and they had to battle against misogyny. Their claim is that throughout their lives, they have been held back, put down, and abused by men because they are women. Therefore, it stands to reason that if we have a person, a man or a woman, who is disparaged, abused, and put down by the female gender their whole lives, wouldn't it stand to reason that they might develop a form of misogyny? In fact, I do not believe that ingrained or learned contempt or dislike for a particular group is evil in itself. In fact, when it is backed up by experiences and by life situations that have forced a person to feel this way, I think we should have compassion for that person, and instead of leveling more abuse on them, we should show them how they're wrong in feeling that way by providing love and compassion and understanding. Unfortunately, that is not what we see. In fact, the term actual definition of misogyny is not really used in the same way you'd think it would be used. For instance, the most recent situation with Reddit firing of Victoria, who was a woman, and subsequent reaction of Redditors calling for resignation of Ellen, CEO, another woman. People have preferentially chosen to look at the situation and consider the request for resignation of Ellen as misogyny, yet the firing of Victoria is not misogyny. So the point is, when the word is used appropriately, misogyny, misandry, prejudice of any other kind, I think we need to look deeper into the situation and examine why the person feels that way. Maybe we need to ask them why they feel that way. Maybe we need to show them compassion and love and understanding, specifically from the gender that they have an issue with, in order to help clear their experiences and change their mind towards the better. However, when the word misogyny is used as a bludgeon to coerce and level guilt and socially punish to subjugate, then it becomes a problem. In fact, when you see a group of women foaming at the mouth, rapidly firing people from their jobs and making them apologize tearfully on television for their choice in clothing, or their choice in organizations they support, or their choice in human rights, that may actually give some valid basis for dislike of a particular group, that particular group of women, especially when they're using the fact that they're women as the one and only reason to make you quit your job. There we can sort of see a reason for dislike and distaste of women. However wrong that association may be, it is only human to associate an attacker with the attack. So the only way to overcome perceived or real misogyny and misandry is to show a good side, is to show a positive, compassionate, and loving side. We hear the word misogyny, particularly in the past 5 years, and especially in the last year, as leveled against gamers and scientists and human rights activists who do not conform to a particular ideology. That ideology being the progressive, radical feminist, third wave feminism. In fact, we see such things as hashtags kill all men and end Father's Day as being acceptable for hundreds of thousands of people to participate in online. And there's quite frequently rhetoric of drinking male tears and putting on makeup in a way that is like a spear of Athena's to slay any man. And such ideology coming out from the female group and the female half of the vocal radical internet fringe group. Yet, anytime a man tries to say, firstly, that they even have rights, or that maybe some of their rights are being trumped on, and maybe some rights women have that men don't, then we hear misogyny. Yet, up until about a year ago, nobody really knew what misandry was, which is the opposite of misogyny. It is dislike and distrust of men. So we have a radical feminist group operating within very misandrous parameters, while screaming misogyny at anyone who disagrees with them, be it a woman or a man. In that sense, I believe it is quite a disingenuous term to use, because it doesn't matter if a woman is fired or a woman is bullied. If that woman doesn't agree with the progressive, radical feminist third wave, then misogyny is not being cried. Nobody goes to bat for that woman other than other men. And quite frequently we see complete allowance of misandry in social media, while even the mere hint of an idea that women may not be perfect is not allowed. Quite frequently nowadays we see feminism and feminist rhetoric tied with very directly grievances towards men. In fact, feminism does not pass the Bechdel test. Most of the issues that feminism talks about, at least the third wave radical feminism, has to do with men. Every topic that they come up with somehow relates to men. Once again, that does not pass the Bechdel test, which is another thing that we are being given as a society that we need to live up to. There are feminist rules and benchmarks that must be met by current society. And one of those benchmarks is complete dismissal of men's rights and complete dismissal of men as even human beings. In fact, there were multiple articles that came out talking about men needing to be maybe out on a pasture field somewhere as slaves. And a lot of the feminist ideology really sets up a gender binary and a gender war. I can quote Virginia Woolf or Bette Davis or Jane Austen, and most of their quotes have to do with feeling wronged and oppressed by men. So we see misandry a lot more frequently and through many more years than we've even heard of misogyny or see any evidence of such. In fact, when a woman and a group of women can make a renowned scientist cry on television for his choice of clothing that was made by a woman, and all of that in the name of misogyny, you start to suspect that something may be fishy here, that something may be rotten in the state of feminism. Now, the actual definition of misogyny, the concept of dislike or distrust of a particular group, is not evil in itself. It is not inherently bad. After all, the feminist theory tells us that men as a group are bad, and that men as a group are oppressing women everywhere. So misandry is okay, but misogyny isn't? That doesn't sound very equal to me. In fact, misogyny and the idea of social control behind it has gone so far as to postulate that any woman who disagrees with the particular ideology of the radical feminist third wave has internalized misogyny. In fact, the small group of women are claiming that they know what all the other women are going through and what all the other women are thinking, and they're claiming that it has to do with internalized self-hatred. So we have completely unqualified people who had no degrees in psychology or neuroscience, unlike myself, who claim to know mental disorders and problems with self-esteem that a group of women that they never met and they never talked to beyond 5 seconds has. So misogyny is used as a bludgeon, a social control tactic to silence opposition. In fact, we care about women and their feelings as a society so much that the mere word misogyny or any hint of hatred towards women is sending everybody scurrying like cockroaches at the light. All you have to do nowadays as a social or pop culture critic is to drop the word misogyny and instantly you win your argument. It doesn't matter what that argument is. So tell me again, how is it that we do not value women or their feelings or their experiences if dislike of women alone is enough to have people lose their jobs and to be out of a livelihood and to be publicly shamed on television? Tell me again how that is evidence of patriarchy when men cry on television for wearing shirts that other women have made them just because it doesn't agree with a particular group. Tell me again how it's about equality when spell checkers are still underlining the word misandry as unrecognized. Tell me again how it's about equality when I look up women's activist in a dictionary and it comes up with the word feminism, while when I look up men's activism in a dictionary, there's a blank page. Therefore, you have to understand the true definition of misogyny. Misogyny is a guilt-driven, emotional bludgeon used to silence people who do not agree with radical third-wave feminism. And in fact, people who do not agree with a specific subsection of feminism. Because if a woman disagrees with any of those things, she's labeled as having internalized misogyny. No matter what the rational or critical argument of the idea that somebody's postulating may be, all of that is thrown out the window, and the word misogyny is replacing it. Valid criticisms are being ignored because there's a handy scapegoat of misogyny. If a woman is postulating an idea that is destructive or maladaptive or hurtful to herself or others, we're not allowed to bring it into question because the word misogyny is dropped on our heads and instantly everybody looks at that person as a terrible human being. In fact, nowadays, I think misogyny has become a scarier term than even racism. And that should give you something to think about. That, in itself, is clear evidence that we care about women.